ceasefire. And there's a lot of discussion about who actually got this deal over the line. Was it this administration, or was it the presence of people from the incoming administration that was able to do it? I recognize that you guys have pretty much welcomed the Trump administration's involvement in this. Why?
Let me say a few things first before I get to the specific question of why we have welcomed their support. The first is that this ceasefire agreement is an agreement that was conceived of by this administration, that this administration traveled the world to garner support for, and that members from Secretary Blinken on down put their credibility behind. There are a number of things I think that went into getting here today, but if you look at the most important, or let me give you two really important factors before I get to the question about President-elect Trump's involvement. I think the most important factor was that after the president laid out this proposal publicly at the end of May, Secretary Blinken and other members of the United States government went around the world generating support for this proposal, and won the endorsement of not just countries in Europe, but countries across the Middle East, Arab and Muslim countries across the Middle East that said they supported this proposal. It won the endorsement of the United Nations Security Council. And what that did is it left Hamas isolated and alone. And I can tell you that we began to see a weakening of Hamas's position after that diplomatic campaign that we executed. The other thing that I think was critical to getting us here today is Hamas finally realized that the broader regional war that they had been hoping to achieve since October 7th, the broader regional war that was part of their original strategic effort, that they weren't going to get that their allies in Hezbollah were weakened and decimated, that Iran was not going to come to their aid, was not going to launch a full regional war, and that was to some extent because of the work that the United States did to prevent that from happening. And that the fall of Syria showed that one of their last allies was, fall of the Syrian regime, I should say, that one of their last allies was erased from the map. So I think you add those things together, you had in Hamas, first, a terrorist organization that was isolated, and then it eventually left realizing that it really had no choice but to accept a ceasefire because the strategic goal that they wanted to achieve for so long just wasn't going to happen. Now, when it comes to the involvement of President-elect Trump's team, it has been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line. And it's been critical because, obviously, as I stand here today, this administration's term in office will expire in 5 days. And one of the things that we have always said about this deal is that when you get from stage 1 to stage 2, that the United States, Egypt, and Qatar are the guarantors of this deal. And Egypt and Qatar will push Hamas to stay at the bargaining table and to get from stage 1 to stage 2, and the United States will push Israel to stay at the bargaining table to get from phase 1 and phase 2. So obviously those are promises we cannot make on behalf of the United States for any longer than the next 5 days. And so it's critical that all of the parties to the agreement and the other mediators see that when the United States is in the room making commitments, those are lasting commitments that extend beyond this administration into the next one. I would just say, lastly, I don't know if it's unprecedented to have envoys from an outgoing and an incoming administration sitting at the same table negotiating a ceasefire agreement of this kind. But if it's not unprecedented, it's certainly unusual. And we, of course, thank the Trump team for working with this on this ceasefire agreement. We think it's important that they were at the table. And I think it shows that when Americans are willing to work together across partisan lines, as we were willing to do on this occasion, because it's in the national interest of the United States, there's a lot that we can get done.
So as you know, over the course of the last year, as this has been being negotiated, getting from phase 1 to phase 2, which is critical, is never been guaranteed, and in fact, a lot of people don't think it will ever happen.
Yeah.
It's just, do you have confidence that the incoming administration is going to push for phase two as much as you guys had been or would have done had President Biden been reelected?
I, of course, can't speak for what the incoming administration can do. What I can say is it is very much in the interest of the incoming administration to push to turn this agreement from phase one into a lasting end to the war, which is what happens when you get to phase two and phase three. There are hostages that will continue to be held after the expiration of phase one, and it's in the interest of everyone to see that those hostages return home. It is in the interest of everyone that the war that will stop upon the completion of the ceasefire agreement does not resume at the end of 6 weeks or subsequent to that if negotiations have extended beyond the opening 6 weeks. So it is very much in their interest, just as we believe it is in the interest of Israel that this turn into a lasting peace. If you look at all the conditions have to be right for a deal to come together. And if you look at the conditions from an Israeli point of view, you've heard me speak to this from the podium before, and you've heard Secretary Blinken speak to it. Israel had really achieved all of its major strategic goals already in Gaza. They had decimated Hamas's military capabilities. They had wiped out the leadership that existed on October 7th, including Yahya Sinwar himself, the military leader of Hamas. So it's very much in Israel's strategic interest that this war not reopen in 6 weeks, and that they're left fighting the same kind of battles over and over again as Hamas recruits new militants to replace the ones that Israel's killing on the battlefield.
But you don't buy this line that the president-elect's relationship or influence with Prime Minister Netanyahu was the thing that pushed it over the line.
Not only do I not buy it, it's not what we've seen in the negotiations. We've seen that the important factor when it comes to their involvement has been the continuity that it shows, having both the outgoing administration and the incoming administration there at the table.
And